In this video, I'm going to tell you why growing up in poverty is not always a negative thing. While this may sound rather paradoxical, I'm going to tell you why experiencing poverty can have a lasting positive effect on your life. You see, growing up in my world, around my time, my world was defined by scarcity, as I hope I'm pronouncing correctly. Not a lack of love, but a lack of material possessions. You see, we live in very humble circumstances, a reality many might consider a disadvantage. But looking back, I realized that those experiences, those challenges, sculpt me into the person that I am today. You see, poverty in its own paradoxical way became my greatest teacher. I can recall as a kid growing up, with my grandmother. I was the eldest of four grandchildren who she was raising on her own as a single parent. And I'm going to explain in another video why my mother and father were not around. It was a kind of a common thing around that time. Now, as a child, I could remember how she struggled to feed us. She would do all kind of odd jobs here and there in the community just to earn a little cash, just to earn a little money so she could buy something from the shop for dinner. She did her very best to ensure that we attended school, even though many times we never had lunch or even lunch money. I recall the little 2-room house we lived in. Man, that place, it was rat and bat infested, and it leaked like a sieve when it rained. I remember as a kid, I'd have to be shifting from one side of the bed, to the other especially when it rained at night, right? Because guess what? Water was dripping on me in the bed, But by God's grace, I made it through elementary and high school, and I was able to land, a fairly decent job, after graduation. Nothing extraordinary. It was not a lot of money, but good enough to buy a little grocery at the end of the week. And one of the first things I did to repay my grandma for for her courage, her strength and her fortitude, through those very hard times, was by building her a little dwelling, I kind of repaired the old house we grew up in, just to make it a little bit more comfortable to lay her head at night. Looking back though, the first and perhaps the most crucial lesson poverty taught, imparted on me was resilience, and mental fortitude. When resources were limited, you have to learn to adapt, to improvise and to withstand hardships, right? As children, there were times when we didn't know where the next meal would be coming from. But guess what? We always found a way. And, looking back, those experiences, kind of forge a mental toughness that has served me well throughout my life. I learned from those experiences that setbacks are not roadblocks, but rather, they're basically detours that require ingenuity and perseverance. I also learned to embrace this struggle, knowing that it would ultimately make me stronger. Looking back, living in a world where every penny counted where every breadcrumbs, every crumbs was meaningful, has also instilled a deep sense of humility and gratitude in me. You know, those experiences taught me that when you have little, you appreciate everything. For example, you know, a warm meal, a roof over your head, the kindness of a neighbor, though, you know, those things became invaluable treasures in, you know, for me up to this point in my life. You know, I learned to be grateful for the simple things, you know, for the love and support of my family and my community. I learned that true wealth, you know, true wealth lies not in, you know, in material possessions, right? But true wealth, you know, it's in the richness of the, you know, of human connection, you know? You know, this kind of gratitude has grounded me, you know, reminding me that even in the face of adversity, there's always something to be thankful for. Another thing poverty has imparted in me, you know, it has fostered, you know, a kind of a strong social bond in my community when I was growing up. We, you know, one of the things we had to do, we had to rely on each other. We, you know, we shared the little we had. We helped each other, you know, through the tough times. I can recall when sometimes my grandmother, she never had anything to cook for dinner. But guess what? The neighbors around would send over some of what they cook, you know, and, you know, share with us so we could have something for our dinner, you know. You know, and though, you know, I learned, you know, the importance of community from those experiences, you know, of looking out for one another and, you know, and of building meaningful relationships, you know. Those kind of bonds have become the foundation of my life, you know, reminding me that we are all interconnected and that we are stronger together. You know, have you ever heard the saying that necessity is the mother of invention? Well, in our case, back in those days, it was also the mother of financial literacy and financial management. You know, when we had anything to spend, to be honest, because we never had much money. You know, but growing up, I learned to budget, you know, to save, to make the most of every cent. You know, I understood the value of hard work and the importance of financial responsibility. You know, I learned to distinguish between needs and wants, you know, to prioritize and to make wise financial decisions, right? You know, and, you know, looking back, this early exposure to financial realities kind of gave me a more practical understanding of money management that many people have never acquired, you know. So, you know, being poor, you know, frugality, they say, you know, became a way of life. You know, we learned to make do with what we had, you know. You know, we would repair what we had instead of replacing it. You know, we would kind of repurpose, you know, or recycle. You know, we appreciated the value of things, you know, to avoid waste and to live sustainably. You know, and this kind of frugality wasn't about, you know, deprivation, right? Don't look at it that way. It was about resourcefulness and creativity. You know, that's the way I look at it. So poverty taught me to appreciate, you know, the simple pleasures of life, you know, the simple things in life, and to find joy in making the most of what I had, right? And what I have today also. Another thing poverty has ignited in me, you know, is a passion for creativity. You see, when you lack material resources, right, you have to learn, you have to kind of rely on your imagination and ingenuity, right? we found creative ways as kids back then to entertain ourselves, to solve problems and to express ourselves, right? I can recall as a kid, we made our own toys. At least I made my own toy from scraps. We created stories from our imaginations, and we found beauty in the ordinary stuff. And guess what? This fostered a spirit of innovation and just a belief in the power of creativity that has shaped me, my personal and professional life up to this day. So, the challenges of poverty, kind of became a catalyst, for personal growth and life lessons. Thinking about it, I learned to be more self-reliant, to problem solve and to take initiative. I learned to be patient, to persevere and to never give up on my dreams. Never. I learned that adversity can be a powerful teacher, and that challenges can lead to profound and personal growth. And those experiences have made me more resilient, more compassionate, and more determined to make a positive impact on the world today. You see, looking back, perhaps one of the most significant lessons poverty has taught me also was perspective. And I think I mentioned gratitude already. I learned that happiness is not dependent on material possessions, right? But more so, on the richness of the human connection, the beauty of simple moments and the appreciation for what we have. That's kind of my outlook right now. I learned to see the world through the lens of gratitude, to appreciate the small things and to find joy in the present moment, And this kind of perspective has allowed me to live a more kind of fulfilling and meaningful life, regardless of my circumstances. That's what I'm trying to say. You see, so growing up in poverty wasn't easy. There were times when it was difficult, really difficult. And there were times when I felt overwhelmed. I thought about my grandmother then. She looked overwhelmed sometimes, But, looking back, I wouldn't change a thing. I mean, yes, if I could. But those experiences kind of shaped me into the person I am today. Those experiences taught me the importance of resilience, of gratitude and community and creativity. They also taught me that true wealth lies not in material possessions, right? But in the richness of human connection and the strength of the human spirit, right? Those are the things that, make you happy. So poverty was my teacher, and I am grateful for the lessons it has taught me. It wasn't easy, but I have learned so much. So much from growing up in those kind of circumstances today. I'm not sure what your situation was like. I'm not sure whether or not you grew up in a time or an era or a situation when you never had much. I'm not sure if you grew up in an environment where every meal was like a blessing, where every piece of clothes was like, a blessing, and every turn was like a struggle. I'm not sure what life was like for you, but if that was the case, honestly, I can relate. Because for me as a child, it was really tough. Really tough. But like I said, I did not allow those things to kind of, you know, to change me or to, you know, what's the right word? To kind of deflate me, even as a kid. Because looking back, then as a kid, I still believe that things were going to work out, things were going to get better. So if you're going through hard times right now, and if you know, even if you have never had to go through those kind of situations, but you know, I just wanted to kind of give you a different perspective of how poverty can have a positive effect, you know, on your life. It surely had a positive effect on my life. It's, you know, it sounds a bit paradoxical, but you know, it's true. I mean, when we think about poverty, nothing but negative connotations kind of jump to mind. But yeah, here I am today. Much better for it. Anyway, if you like this video, if you like these kind of, you know, these kind of deep thinking and you know, the kind of route that I take with these videos sometimes, you know, just talking about the human experience and, you know, personal experiences here and there, give me a thumbs up. And if you like this video, don't forget to follow the channel, so you know, you never miss the next one, because I have a lot to share with you, a whole lot of videos coming up to share with you. So until I see you again, you take care, and don't let poverty define you. Okay? It can shape you, it may shape or mold you, but don't let it become the defining factor as you move forward in life. All right? Have a great day.